Back in the year 1919, London was rocked by a scandal that hit in two stages. The first stage was when a novel called The Sheik was published. It was written by E.M. Hull, and it was about a young woman who was abducted by an Arab sheik. Now, even though there was nothing really, explicit in the novel, the concept was enough to cause a national outcry. In fact, the reviewers couldn't even tell their readers what this book was about because it would be improper to mention those subjects in public. So they called the novel La Grande Scandale de tout le monde, which means the biggest scandal in the world, because they thought that saying it in French would be more civilized than saying it in English. How shocking could you get? Critics said that the novel had no literary merit and would appeal only to gullible females. Well, there must have been a lot of gullible females out there, a lot of them, because the Sheik went right through the roof. And that's when the second stage of the scandal hit. It turned out that the book's author, E.M. Hull, was actually Edith Maud Hull, who was not only a female, she wasn't even married. I mean, the idea that an unmarried woman would even think about such things caused an uproar all over again. Things have changed. Not much, but a little bit. Well, now, that was nothing, of course, compared to what happened 2 years later in the United States when Paramount made The Sheik into a silent motion picture. In the title role was a relatively unknown actor by the name of Rudolph Valentino. You see, the studio gave him the part because they were afraid this movie would drop dead, and they didn't want any of their really big stars to be associated with a flop. Like the novel's publication in England, the movie version of this story was just too terrible. Let's see what all the fuss was about. Here's Rudolph Valentino in The Sheik. It's great fun to see those movies, isn't it? We don't often have the opportunity to show the silence here on American Movie Classics. A year after The Sheik was released, it was brought back to the theaters. Paramount now wanted to take advantage of the fact that Rudolph Valentino's name was in the headlines almost every day. He had filed for divorce from his first wife, Jean Acker, and every day the intimate details of their private lives was published in just about every newspaper in the country, so the publicity was hot. The judge finally agreed with Valentino's version and not only granted the divorce, but he cut poor Acker off with almost no alimony at all. But the divorce turned out to be the minor scandal. In those days, a divorce decree wasn't final until 1 year after it was made. And before the year was up, Valentino went into Mexico and he married a woman by the name of Natasha Rambova, who was in real life Winifred Hudnut, a member of one of New York's wealthiest families. He was really the upper crust, you see. And when they returned to the United States, he was arrested for bigamy. Now, there were real problems. Happily, Valentino was able to prove that they had not lived together as man and wife, so he didn't have to go to jail. For the next year, the press watched them constantly, hoping to catch them in some kind of a compromising situation. They love that sort of thing. Well, they never did. Rudolph Valentino and Natasha set their vows for a second time on March 14th, I believe, of 1923 in Crown Point, Indiana. And this time, their marriage was legal, so the papers didn't even want to report it. Now let's take a look at this.